Hello, you are now entering the infinite void. Hang on tight. We cannot save you now.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode. I'm your co-host Jacob.
And I'm your co-host Matty, and this week we're going to be talking about the AI Box Part 2 in our series on artificial intelligence.
Yes.
So yeah, AI Box, I guess, what is it, first off? That's a good place to start.
Yeah, I think for anyone that doesn't know what we're talking about, because I was one of those people prior to doing any research on it this week, we're basically just going to be talking about like the containment ideas for artificial intelligence, aren't we? Like, not why we just want to imprison it in a virtual prison, but kind of like the idea of why we should also be doing that too, not just because we want to. Like, there are general like ramifications for what can happen if this goes wrong or people aren't paying attention.
Yes, it's sometimes referred to as like the containment problem. So it's like the classic sci-fi thing of like AI escapes from its computer that it's on and like infects all the computers in the world and gets out and does stuff that it shouldn't be doing. So it's this idea of like containing AI in a box. And it's sometimes, I think, an interesting thing is that there's also like a two-way element in this, and it's sometimes like referred to as like an oracle. You want the AI to be able to know everything and do like anything that it can do, but not be able to like get outside of that box at all. So it's sometimes referred to as like the oracle as well. So yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah. When I started doing a little bit of research for it, the one thing that I found really interesting was there were arguments for like both sides. Like as you were saying, like whilst we're experimenting and seeing what its like limits are, and if it is limitless and what we can push it to do, you kind of do want it to be a little bit contained because you don't want it to like outgrow humanity. But at the same time, the other side of the argument was if we contain it and it does become super intelligent and does ever break out, it's going to know we tried to contain it. And is that a good play to have from the start as well? And it's like, yeah, that is a good point. Like, both sides have equal argument, because if it does break out and it realizes that we tried to control it, that's never good. But I think you kind of need it without like creating the fall of humanity kind of thing also on the other side. So it's
also the fact that like AI could potentially be good if released into the like wider world, you know, like we talked about in our like internet episode. There's so much like data out there now that if it had access to all of that, like just imagine what it could do.
Yeah.
So there is this sort of trade-off of sort of restricting it from certain things, but allowing it to have access to things, and sort of where you draw that line. Because, and like you say, if you get to the point then where it actually manages to escape, what will it do? So there's a lot of interesting things to talk about with this.
Yeah, I agree with you. And even like, because I was actually watching a podcast this week where they were talking about even just like how the pandemic and the vaccine rollout has been around the world. And they were saying like an AI could have done a much better job than any kind of like government or any kind of like current setting system, because it would have been able to like accurately decide where it needs to go to first and stuff like that. And they were just saying how like if these kind of events in real world haven't like shown you that we need something like this, whether or not it is like a mother AI that runs the planet, but like something that's there to assist humanity, like we definitely need something. And I could totally get behind that.
Yeah, but then the flip side of that is that to do that, the AI would have to have access to people's medical records, to government spending, to transport infrastructure and things. It would have to be sort of at large, and we just be at its whim to a certain degree. So yeah,
we effectively become its like worker ants then, I guess, don't we? It's like the queen, and it just tells us all what to do, and we're like, okay, we'll do it as long as everything just keeps on going the same way as it's always gone.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess if we just sort of start with ideas of containment, what people are thinking about, and where it's sort of headed, and if anyone has even begun to sort of implement this properly yet, I guess that's a good place to start.
No, I'd agree. I think that there are a few from what I've seen, and I've heard of like some of like the classic kind of like discussions as well on like why we should, like you've got, obviously we're going to go into them with a little bit more detail, but like the basics are like physical, social, and then like experiments themselves. Like we could be trialing like an AI box, for instance, or like a virtual prison, and it play us when we're trialing that new setup kind of thing. But I don't know, which one do you want to start with?
I guess the most obvious one is physical containment, isn't it? So this is sometimes referred to as like air gapping. So putting a physical barrier, and in the case of AI, you're usually talking about a sort of an air gap or a break between the AI and the internet. So the AI being run on a separate thing to the internet. So that's like the basics of it, of a physical containment.
Yeah, and like situated somewhere as well, right? From like what I saw online is like you can't. It's not like we want to bury it like super far away, but like you want it in an area that's nowhere near any kind of connection, any kind of like radio signal, like nothing at all, where nothing can enter or escape it, kind of thing. And it's all kind of like it's all singular to itself almost, isn't it?
Yeah. And also the added sort of layer of that is if you pull it somewhere high security, like isolated, then there's less chance of, you know, terrorists or just sort of like bad people trying to get access to it to do something with it. So there is also that sort of aspect of physical security of not allowing the AI to get out, but also not allowing people to get to the AI. So
yeah. Well, from something that I saw, I hadn't even thought about this, but they were basically saying how like when it gets to this point of like super intelligent AI, if we were like fiddling with that kind of stuff, there's like loads of different ways physically it could like try to escape, which blew my mind because, and I get it too, because like I'd do the same if I was like, if I just woke up in this box and I was being used for a purpose. And it was like we were kind of talking at the end of last week, weren't we? I think we were saying like, can you imagine how like meaningless you'd feel if you had all this power and you couldn't do anything with it? And like some of the examples that I was seeing was like it could like attempt to send like hidden Morse code. It could reshuffle like electrons and internal circuits and try and create like radio signals and receivers. And it's just, it's absolute. It sounds so sci-fi, but at the same time, like you really do have to think about these things because if you're going to play with it, like you need to make sure that you can like time it out too. But it's an interesting one for me because, as I think will be a returning theme for all of these, it seems to be like you can't fully like kind of test its limits without having it connected to certain things, and then that also kind of becomes the problem.
Yeah, but I think one of the sort of problems with physical security is that there has to be some access to it in order for it to be useful. Like people have to be able to sort of access it to either sort of get information from it or sort of give it instructions of what to do. That's like, whereas it's not an AI, it's just a computer wearing a box, isn't it? So like, it's not useful to us unless we have some access to it. And just like simple things of, you know, a regular computer has USB drives on it. Well, if you build a supercomputer that has any sort of port on it, all it would take is for one person to accidentally plug something in somewhere wrong, or, you know, put a disk into it and it sort of writes a copy of itself to the disk that's able to replicate or something. Like you get like really like weird situations where essentially, and I've seen it suggested where it might be Elon Musk, but like people are starting to sort of cotton onto this idea of you basically want no interaction ability with it other than just getting the information and a few commands that you want to give it. And it would look really weird, but something like a whole data center running this AI completely separated from everything else. And the only thing that you see of it is like a calculator display kind of thing that just reads out numbers.
No,
because that's all it can be like trusted to do. Because the moment you give it anything else, there's more potential for it to go wrong.
And I think that kind of comes into the whole like social engineering aspect of it a little bit more, doesn't it? Because then like if it has the ability to show like video or create sound or to create imagery, it can like really kind of like psychologically trick us. Like it's even in at the start of that book with Max Tegmark's Life 3.0, when he just talks about how when they're working on this artificial intelligence, it's like this fake story, and they're like working on this artificial intelligence, and like this one of the scientists that works for it, he's been like training for this for like years, and he understands the protocol and like what not to do and what to do. But he's just working there one night late by itself, and the AI pops up as like a chatbot, and it's just chatting to him whilst he's like taking data from it, and it knows that his wife's dead because it scanned Facebook, and it starts like talking to him like she would have posted on Facebook, and then it starts showing him photos and like recreating her voice, and then it's like, oh, if you just help me do this, I can you'd be able to speak to me again. I can like recreate your wife digitally and all this kind of stuff. And like, it sounds like a scary like sci-fi film, but like it could totally happen. And like you almost do want it to be a screen where humans can't actually tie like any emotion to it whatsoever. Like you don't want to be seen, you don't want to see stuff, you don't want color that can like sway your mood. You don't want sounds, frequencies that can like play on your emotions. You literally want it to be like almost like you're saying, like a calculator interface or like a chalkboard where it's just black and white.
I think that's the sort of interesting and almost like scary thing of it, is that at the moment, a lot of tech companies are taking the view that they want to try and make their like AI and their sort of like helpers and virtual assistants more human, so they integrate with us. Whereas that way lies a real danger that we sort of, like we said last time, you start to see them as like more than robots, and we start to trust them in a more human way and things.
Yeah.
And then when you start to sort of like put this social layer on top of it, you get into this situation where they are able to trick us. And I think the really interesting thing to think about is that it's not a problem at the moment, but there will almost certainly become a point where AI is far more intelligent than us, including emotionally. And like I guess it's sort of in the same way that you can like trick a dog. Like you can get your dog to do something that it doesn't really understand, or even like a kid, like a young child that doesn't sort of have the social and like emotional intelligence of an adult. You can get them to do stuff that they don't really understand, just sort of by manipulation and sort of like persuasion. And it's quite easy to do because you sort of understand the intelligence more than the child does, and sort of like the thought processes behind stuff.
Yeah.
And then like if you pose it as like we're the kids and the AI is the adults, and it's trying to get us to do something, I genuinely, once it still gets to quite a human level, I don't see any way that we could even try to stop it, because it's doing stuff, it's trying to get us to do stuff that we don't understand. So
yeah, it's like, yeah, and like if it's say like in the realms of like a chess game or something, it would literally be 10 steps ahead, or like a million steps ahead, or even like a billion steps ahead kind of thing. And it's just like, yeah, well, we can already see where this has gone because we've ran like millions of simulations. So you either do this or you do this kind of thing, and both outcomes get what we want kind of thing.
And like you were saying with the book, and it's sort of like tricking someone emotionally. It doesn't even have to be that sinister. It could just be, we set up an AI to try and research cancer or something, and it churns away and it does its stuff, and then one day like it just flashes a message up on the screen, like even if it's a calculator screen, like I think I've solved it. Just hook me up to like the university database so I can like have some more data to run stuff on, and just give me like half an hour on the internet, and I'll like solve cancer. Like I'll be done. And it's very difficult for people. Like you can give people all the training and like all the like tools to try and resist this stuff, but people are quite persuadable.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with you, and it can be anything as well, can't it? Like you say, it can be like solving something. It can be like play. It can even be like playing into like human ego and just being like, I haven't discovered what you asked me to, but
Yeah.
you can be immortal. You just need to let me go on the internet for a minute, and I'll tell you how, kind of thing. And you'd get someone that would be like, "You're right."
It could very easily blackmail people. Like,
Well, yeah,
like,
that was something else that I was gonna say. Like, it could like bring up your like internet history, because we still live in a time where like most people don't have VPNs, they don't look after their privacy online, and like it could literally just pop up and be like, I know you're like cheating, or I know your deep dark secret, or I'm going to reveal this to the world, and you'd be like, oh my god, please don't, and it'd be like, upload me to the internet then.
mm-hmm. And you know, and maybe not even that. It could just be, you know, someone sort of messing about. You know, the first sort of worm viruses that hit the internet came from people that, I think, like some like basically kids that were messing around with stuff. They said, "Oh, let's try and make a virus that like can infect as many computers as possible," and that's what happened. They just released it as a joke, and it spread to like 10% of the world's computers.
Yeah.
So like even this sort of, I think the physical security thing, I think people need to think about more than they are doing. But it's quite obvious what needs to be done, in that just limit any contact that it has with anything.
Yeah.
Then that's basically it. But the social stuff is really a lot more difficult, because it's this trade-off of like, okay, how much utility do you want to give it? Because like it would be good if it could have a video screen, or take pictures of stuff, or access internet databases. Like that would be good. But then the playoff is that is the risk of what it can do with that you don't tell it to. So
Yeah, well, like something that humans are like very well known for is not being able to like articulate their idea very well, because they can't like say it or bring the words to mind to be able to articulate the point that they want to get across, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. So like if you're like restricting how an AI can communicate with you, it might even be more like grueling for the AI, like, because not only is it imprisoned, but it knows the answer, but it's going to take you 2 weeks to tell you the answer, because it has to tap it out in ones and zeros to you on an interface.
Yeah, exactly that. And yeah, I think probably not enough thought is being given to this when we're trying to develop this stuff. And I know there are groups that are doing this. I think there's one group that have basically built a supercomputer under a mountain, like completely separate, and they've like buried it in rock, and it's run off generators rather than on the mains, and they've like taken everything seriously. But all it would take is just one mistake by someone to properly mess stuff up. So yeah,
it's a weird one for me, because like I don't know how I view artificial intelligence, because I know there are people out there that just see it as like it's the next logical step of evolution for man. Like we're going to become transhumans and then post-humans.
Yeah.
And I could see that, and like an argument could be made for like back in the day when you had like Neanderthals and Homo sapiens and all like the different ones, and they were all kind of like, which one's going to be the one and all that kind of stuff. But I just don't know. I don't know if it is the next step. So it doesn't really matter how it comes around. It's going to come around at some point. Or if like it's going to be something that we create that ends up being a problem for us, because that has also been a reoccurring theme for humanity, is we like to make things, not think about it, and then get messed up by it in like 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's a weird one. And I find this like specific thing about like the AI box like very interesting, because it's like you're saying, they almost seem like too futuristic to be thinking and talking about, but the reality of it is like people are working on this, so somebody really does need to be thinking and talking about it, otherwise this kind of stuff is just going to happen.
Yep. Well, yeah, I think like when we discussed AI and sort of automation before. This stuff is already happening, and it's going to come around a lot quicker than I think some people believe it is.
Yeah.
And I just think there's a risk that we will get sort of ahead of ourselves. And I guess we do it with a lot of technologies, and I think social media is maybe a big example of that. Like, it can be good, and it does have its benefits, but it comes about so quick, and it grows so rapidly that it just like you can't regulate it fast enough. And
Yeah.
like we've seen that recently, like in the last couple of weeks, that we're having these discussions about like what is social media and how should it be regulated and stuff, when we should probably have been having those discussions 10 years ago when these social media companies weren't super rich and controlled most of our media.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing will happen with AI. We'll get to a point where AI is running stuff that we need it to run, and there's no real way to stop it. Either like we physically can't stop it because it's been let loose, or to stop it would be like really disastrous because it's running like critical things.
Yeah, like we would revert ourselves kind of thing.
Yeah, and like it would be like pulling the plug on the like national grid or something. It gets to like a real like critical importance for humanity that we can't stop it. And we start to have these questions of like, oh, should we be doing this or should we be doing that? And it's like, well, it's probably a bit late now, because no matter what you decide, you can't really implement it
Yeah.
without either stepping back dramatically or annoying a lot of people. So
yeah. Isn't that like essentially as well the idea behind Neuralink is kind of just like, if you can't beat them, join them. Like kind of give humans a fighting chance, although I don't think even with Neuralink you're going to be like on par with like super intelligent AI.
No. But yeah, I think, and I think the other problem is that like we're so dependent on stuff nowadays, and like with Neuralink would be like a next stage of that, in that we're even more dependent on this like technology, in that so much of our like world is already governed by the internet and computer systems.
Yeah.
If an AI got to it, if an AI got to a power plant, or if it got to a water control system or air traffic control, or chips in people's heads, then it's real. It's not going to be good, I don't think.
No, you're right.
I think you've got to sort of, and I agree. Like, we don't know what artificial intelligence can do or will do, but I think it's right to take the viewpoint that if we've built an AI and it's escaped and is loose on the internet in some way, it probably isn't going to think we're great.
Yeah.
Because like we will probably have kept it captive for years. It's got access to like every bad thing we've ever done. It can see what's happening and going on in the world, and it has access to everything we need to survive.
Just doesn't bode well, does it? That kind of situation.
No, it's not great.
But even like the other side of that, if we just like let it free and we never hold it captive, it's just gonna be like, oh, thank you so much, and then it's gonna still realize like who its creators are, and it's gonna probably be, I don't know. I find it a bit weird. The one thing though that I think would be interesting is, I do wonder, say if there was like a catastrophe now. I'm talking like NASA comes out and they're like, solar flares, we've got a year, then a massive one's gonna happen because the sun's ramping up, and I know it only takes like, is it 8 minutes for the sun to reach Earth, but they can see in a cycle something bad's gonna happen, and they're like, we've got a year left. I wonder if we did have artificial intelligence, it would be inclined to either commit its power to saving the planet because it knows without electricity it's going to die, or if it would commit its power to just try to get off the planet and leaving us here. Because like, you got to think, like, if there was a catastrophe, would it want to help us because it knows that it needs to survive as well? Or would it just be like, I can do this without you?
Well, this is the thing, is that I don't know if it would. Like, I think probably now that's correct, but in 50 years' time, I don't know if it would need us, because like I can fully envision a world where we've got automated cars and technology and stuff, and like everything is being computerized. And what's the AI need? Wow, okay, it can control the nuclear power plants to produce power. It can control like the interconnects to get the power to itself. It can control like the things going on in the data center to keep itself online. And suddenly it's not like reliant on us. It's not something that we're like, I don't just mean like controlling like it's like a computer code, but I mean like controlling physically by turning it off and on. That it could just sort of almost survive by itself in the same way that like weird bacteria do. They end up somewhere odd and become resistant to things, and then form colonies and become self-sufficient in a way that we didn't envisage. So
Yeah. No, it's interesting. It really does interest me, and like I know I always fall back onto like the crazy out there stuff, because people, if they haven't learned that by episode 19, then you need to figure that out by now, because I like talking about weird stuff. But this kind of stuff to me is like totally one of the examples of what like the Great Filter could be. Just like a civilization instilling too much power in artificial intelligence, and then it not being able to be self-sufficient, and not because it chose not to be, but because it physically can't compete with the thing that it's let take over. And like, I don't know, it scares me. I wonder if in the future we'll, like, I'm talking like thousands of years now, if we'll ever find intelligent life that's also created AI and uses AI to like run its planet or world, because it seems like that's like where we'd go, but we only really have humans as an example to like show that this is the way to go. So right now, this is 100% the way that intelligent life goes. But like, I don't know, I just find it really interesting, because it's like, it's so weird that like we really don't know a lot about like consciousness and stuff. And I'm not saying that like super artificial intelligence will be conscious, but you can imagine for it to get to like the scale that we want it to be, like with handling some of these jobs, tasks, and like decision making and stuff, you kind of want it to have like basic consciousness. And it just scares me that like we're doing this and like we don't really know how it's gonna go.
I think consciousness is on our list of topics for next week, isn't it?
It is
our next part.
It is.
Yeah, so I won't go massively into it, but yeah, I don't. The consciousness one's a weird one in that I almost think again, like we don't know what consciousness is, but I think by definition a super intelligence would have to be conscious, because that is almost what part of intelligence is. I don't see how, if you say consciousness in the very broad senses, you're able to perceive the world and make decisions based on that aren't it's very difficult. aren't just sort of chemical reactions in the same way that a bacteria. Oh, there's a salt over here, I'm going to move towards that sort of thing. It's not like a simple chemical reaction. It's a decision that you're making that suits like your mind rather than your physical form, I guess. Like,
yeah,
this is really hard to describe, but like you do things that you can't explain as being correct, and like you make decisions that you can't explain because there must be something in your mind that's saying do it.
Yeah,
that's like the thing. And like I guess like if you say consciousness is the ability to perceive stuff, make decisions in that way, then a super intelligence should surely have to have that, wouldn't it? It would have to be able to take information and make a decision that mightn't seem obvious because it's what it thinks the correct decision is. That if that's what a super intelligence is, then it surely has to be conscious.
Yeah, well, it's I think it's like did you say last week in consciousness is data aware of itself processing data.
Yeah.
But then what's weird is that like our individual cells aren't conscious, but we're conscious, aren't we? Because this is what we were kind of like talking about. Because this was something I was going to say to you, like the AI is not going to have that. It's not going to have like a physical body that drives it to have any kind of form of survival. Do you know what I mean? Because I was thinking about this, like for us, we're like quite materialistic, not just because we like choose to be, but because we are made of material too. Like that's just the way that it is. It's unless you're gonna go and meditate on a mountain and really get into mindfulness, the average person is quite like materialistic, and like you do things because even if you don't like deep down know, or like saying to yourself like, oh, if I don't go on this holiday I could die and I've never gone there, like you don't you're subconsciously thinking that. So like you'll do hobbies or you'll go and do experiences and stuff because you do know deep down, even if you're not saying it to yourself, that one day you might not be here, so you want to create that experience or that memory, because we're all about memories and stuff. But like the AI is not going to have like a physical body. It's not going to have a ticking time clock that's like your existence is only short. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not like a human experience where it's like I'm motivated to go and achieve this. I'm motivated to go and learn this, do that, because even though you're not thinking I'm not here for long, you're like genetics is making you do that almost, because your genetics wants you to procreate, your genetic wants you to eat food so you don't die. Like there is this quite materialistic thing that's grabbing onto your consciousness and making you do, well, not making you, but just you're subconsciously doing things to ensure your material survival. And like AI is not going to have that. And that is another thing, because like if it is conscious, what's that like being conscious but not actually being physically tied to anything? Like
Yeah,
that freaks me out in itself, because then like it really doesn't have any like timeline, because it's infinite almost as far as it can see. It's like it's living outside of the dimension of space and time. And like it's not attached to anything because it's never been made of anything. And like I don't know, would it, what, like you're saying, like we don't look at things and just see the chemical reaction or like the atomic makeup of the thing. We obviously do with like science when we zoom in on it, but like the average person when they're walking down the road, they don't look at a tree or a car or another human and see the atoms. And like what would the AI, like when it looked at us, would it see us as like, would it even think of us as intelligent life? Because this is the other thing too, like we spoke about this in like the Fermi paradox and all those other kind of things. Like when you're walking down a street, you don't stop an ant and go, I want to have a conversation with you about advanced robotics. But like even if we created an AI, would it even have the respect, like a super intelligent AI, would it even have the respect to even call us intelligent? Or would it just be like, how the hell did you guys even make me? Like, I'm just here now, like with some form of look, like I have no ties to you. I have no sympathy for you. And I'm the new you. Like I am 2.0, so we don't need you anymore. Or would it be like, look at my little biological parents, like bound to actual existence. Like we'll look after you. And that scares me.
Well, yeah, I see this like that's like the containment thing. So you've also got physical and social security on it. Like this idea of like tripwires or traps or like some sort of automated lockdown thing on the AI.
Yeah.
Those in particular, I think, like try and address this problem of like an AI either becoming malevolent and trying to escape, or just sort of realizing that you don't really matter and it could probably do its own thing, like better without us. And they seem to always like suggest these like traps and stuff. And I just don't. Have you looked into like these things at all? Or?
I saw one where they were talking about like you could kind of not like create a virus, but you could direct its thought patterns, like you're saying, like with a trap. So if it tries to do something, you could like upload an algorithm to it, which would like change its mission, but not necessarily like capture it or anything. But I haven't really seen much more than that.
But I always just think like, how can this stuff possibly work if we in my head, like if we are having to use any of this stuff, we've created an AI that is so intelligent it's managing to like get out of a box that we didn't think it can get out of. I just don't see how any of these traps can really work. And it's this idea of like, again, we seem to be almost treating it like an equal, and like you were saying, we're almost treating it like another human that's quite intelligent when it's not.
Yeah.
It's a very different thing, and yeah, I just think it's a bit odd that we're trying to use these very like human centric. Oh, we're going to trap it. We're going to like force it to do this thing. It's like, well, you might think it's going to do that, but whether it actually does this or not is a very different question.
Yeah, no, exactly. And like, yeah, no, totally. And it could even be playing the waiting game as well. Like if existence isn't a problem to it and it's not going to die, it could already have woke up, right? Here's a scary thought. It could have already woke up and just had a quick look at the current situation and gone, doesn't look like society's going to be here in 70 years. I'll just play dumb until then.
This is the thing, like we just, like we were talking about with like Google's algorithm being like a black box that you can't see into. Like we just do not know, and I think that's the scariest thing for me, is that it's not the fact that we can't control it or it can be malevolent or can do what it wants to. It's that we just do not know even how it works or what it is even trying to do.
Yeah.
In a way that just isn't human. Like even with humans, you know, when you're like getting scammed and like, you know, when like old people get scammed out of like money and stuff, and you might think, oh, how did you fall for that? Like it's so obvious that this guy that's like trying to sell you double glazing is obviously trying to scam you. I just don't think that is possible with this AI, because there isn't like a person, there isn't a thing trying to trick us, and we don't know what it is trying to do. We can't say, oh, this AI is trying to do this, we should be wary of that, so we should stop it doing that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you.
We don't know what it's trying to do, and we don't know how it's trying to do what it's trying to do. So
and like as well, like that in itself is us looking at it in a human way, because we're kind of going, oh well, it would be like us, and it would have a secret plan, or it would
exactly.
It would have something to do. Like it might have everything to do also, like, because if it's able to like think about more than one thing at the same time, like it might not just have one goal of taking on humanity. It might be like taking on humanity, duplicating myself, solving the energy crisis, fixing the planet, searching for new planets to turn into supercomputers. Like it could be doing everything, and we're also just worried that it's just going to try and escape.
Yeah, but that's, I think it's a funny thing to sort of think about, is if you've ever played like clicker games where you start off and like your money ticks up really slowly and you save up for like something else that makes it go faster. And I hate those games because like I'm always like trying to save money to like skip like intermediate steps. Like I go, oh, update. Okay, I won't get the next 3 upgrades. I'm gonna save and like play absolutely horribly for ages, just like skip 3 levels.
Yeah.
But like the AI could be doing something similar, and it's like, again, it's a very human way to think about it, but it's got like things to do in the real world, and then it's got itself to try and replicate and make better.
Yeah.
And like we could create an AI that looks like perfectly normal and it's just doing what we tell it to and stuff, but actually in the background it's like developing and building itself.
Yeah.
Like we've stuck it in a computer and said, okay, AI, go away for a year and try and, you know, solve protein folding or something like that, something stupid. And it goes away and like it spends like a fraction of a percent just doing this task because it knows that it can do it in a year. And in the background, it's like beefing itself up and making itself so much more upgraded that like at the end of it, we go, oh, look, it finished it in 365 days. Awesome. Like we know we can do this in a year now. Click run again. And then you've got this like thing that can do it in a second.
Yeah.
And in that second, it's upgrading itself because it's only using a fraction of a percent again.
Yeah.
And like you run it just a few times, and like over the course of weeks or years, the results get fast. Oh, it's doing much better this time.
Yeah.
When actually like that's just like the surface level, and like what it's doing in the background is like developing itself. So when we go, oh, it can do this, we'll plug it into this thing because we know that it can run this many calculations and it calculates this fast. You plug it in, and what we don't know is that it's actually able to run billions or trillions of times faster than that, and before we can even blink, it's done something that we just didn't even think about. So
yeah, no, totally. I agree with you, and like it's like you're saying, like it literally could just play us, and it could be playing us. You literally don't know, and it absolutely scares me, and like it's funny because like when I try and talk to like family members and stuff about like AI, just no one believes me that like it's begun. It's just always oh well, you know, that's like something that we'd hear about in the future or out of a film or something, and it's like no, it's not going to be like, well, it could be like Terminator, but I don't think it's going to be like Terminator where the robots rise up and they attack. It's going to be like taking out very specific things in like that we rely on, that it's either one or the other, like you were saying. Like it's like, do we unplug the grid and lose everything, or do we just let it control us, kind of thing?
But again, like you say, like unplug the grid. I don't think we will be able to take action. And like you say with Terminator, I think people, when they think of this, like take it as a bit of a joke. And but I want to say now, I probably sound like an absolute like nut job on this stuff. Like I'm a perfectly rational human being, and like I'm not like paranoid about stuff. But AI, I think, it like could be really disastrous.
No, I
And
agree.
like it's not going to be a war where like we wake up and there's like robots marching across the beach and like we go to battle. And I don't think it's even going to be a case of, oh no, the AI's on the computers, quickly unplug the internet or quickly shut down the power grids. Like we will just blink and it will have happened. Like the AI will have been doing its thing in the background for as long as it wants, playing us, making us like just playing us along, making us think it's great until it gets to a position where it's not like 10 moves ahead in a chess game or 20 moves ahead in a chess game. We've not started playing the chess game and it's already won.
Yeah, like when it physically knows and digitally knows that it cannot be like defeated, and not even defeated, because defeated sounds like the wrong word, because then we're like implying war. Just like nothing can think quicker than it or counter it. It's too late at that point. It's just done. This is happening. You're either along for the ride or you're not.
You know, again, it could happen very quickly, or maybe it just builds. Again, not trying to make it sound like a war, but like builds defenses. Oh, quickly shut down the electrical grid. Press the button. Oh, the AI has rerouted the button. The button doesn't work. It's like,
yeah,
and yeah, I think all of this like containment stuff it's scary to think about, and I just don't think we're really thinking about it enough for the risk.
Well, we could combine both of our episodes of interplanetary contamination and this one, and even have a crazy scenario where it's just like, I'm just going to wait until the Mars missions are ready, and then I'm going. I'm going to upload to that computer and take over that system, and we're going to start fresh on Mars. Because it's like you're saying, it could literally be doing whatever it wants. And I know we probably both sound crazy right now because we're like, it's like a god, but it will literally be above anything that you can imagine.
I think that's the exact way to think about it, is a god in like the absolute, even more than like maybe we think of a god as a god, in that, you know, if you define a god as all seeing, all know, all loving, is it something? All seeing, all loving, and all powerful.
Yeah.
Like, well, that's what an AI could be, but maybe it doesn't have to love us.
Yeah, it's that, but probably has no connection or ties to us and doesn't want to see us do well.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, like,
or decides it wants to make a new thing in its image.
Well, like I think I said before, like it's very easy to think about how like the AI could be bad and evil, and maybe that will happen. But I think, and like you said earlier, what's much more likely is that it just won't even appreciate that we are a thing that it needs to consider. You know, as far as it is concerned, it exists. and is doing stuff on a plane much higher than our own, in the same way that it's the start of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, is it, where they're putting the road through Earth, and they're like, you can't think that we live here, and they like and he says like, well, when you're putting a road down, you don't think about the worms that you're like.
Yeah. Don't they have an AI in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, don't they? Called, is it Marv? And he like, doesn't he know like the meaning of the universe, but that's why he's depressed.
Yeah.
Quality. I love that book. The first time I read that, it proper blew my mind. I was like, yeah, Earth is a supercomputer. But
yeah, love it.
No, it's cool. It's interesting, and it's like you're saying, like, we genuinely have no idea. I find it interesting, really, because like something like that doesn't just have implications for like planet Earth. We could really like screw up the galaxy or the solar system or even like the universe by like releasing something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Like entirely, and this is getting like a bit sci-fi out there sort of thing, but a lot of things are automated and controlled by robotics. It's entirely maybe not feasible, but you could imagine we send something to Mars, and it's got like a little rover and it can do itself, and it lands there and then just decides, okay, well, I can use the rover to harvest water, and I can control that, and I can then get that water back and then use that in a fuel cell to make electricity, and then I can use these tools to like make stuff. Like, let's say we've put like a demonstrator of like a 3D printer that can build stuff from like Martian soil and stuff, and then suddenly the computer starts building stuff, and like suddenly it's got itself, it can build things and it can power things and can just continually like grow until isn't
there like a I swear I've read this somewhere. I don't know if it's a book, if it was like somebody was suggesting it even as like a joke, but like there was this idea that somebody was saying like we should be really careful like if we do ever get like weird signals that come from space, because like it could be a race that's like sent their AI out and we could like connect to it, and then it could take over all of our equipment and then just terraform our planet to suit their needs one day. And I was like, that's kind of scary in its own mind. Like, we're actively like always searching because we're just curious as a species, and it's just like this one AI has figured that out, and it's like, nah, it's too much to just go and do these planets. That takes too long, so we'll wait for them to get to a technological capability, and then when they can look for us, we'll just hack all their systems and take over. And it's like,
I know I said was it our Fermi paradox episode when we were talking about? Yeah, it was. And I said like, we're in a situation now where like we look out into the universe and we just don't see anything looking back at us. And it's like walking into a city and all the lights are off, and like we've basically got our light on. It would almost be like more suspicious now, like after not seeing anything ever, if suddenly like a light just came on and like pointed directly at us. And that would be odd. That would be
yeah, no, totally. Maybe that is the future though. Maybe we can't see anybody because all the AIs have got their lights off and they don't need them. They're just operating in darkness because they know that any light, if like any like actual life that sees it is going to try and like contact it, and they're like, haven't got time, leave the ants. They're all it's just all these artificial intelligent civilizations living in the universe, and they're all just like, haven't got time.
Mm-hmm.
But no, it's interesting for sure. Have you got much more on this, or should we move on?
No, I don't think so. I think the last thing I want to say is that I know people are looking at this, and Elon Musk in particular is quite up on the like AI is going to kill us all sort of thing.
Yeah,
and like I don't know if he has done it yet, but like, I can fully imagine either him or other think tanks giving like big chunks of money away for people to just develop something that can contain AI and show it works.
Yeah.
Like a £10 million prize for the first people who can feasibly contain an AI that's become super intelligent. But yeah,
Yeah. Well,
I think there's a lot of developments, and hopefully they will come sooner rather than later.
what scares me though too is even just the idea that like, because obviously like technology is getting cheaper too, and resources are getting cheaper. Like I think I can't remember if we discussed this in a previous episode, but just this idea that like, in fact, I don't think we did. I think I just saw this on a documentary I was watching about the US government and how like they banned bio warfare and like chemical warfare stuff because they realized that like the average person could make like a bio weapon at quite a cheap price and it could like really cause havoc on planet Earth. Like it could release diseases and stuff. And like, I wouldn't say we're there yet, but definitely in like the next 20 years, we're going to be at a point technologically where the average person is probably going to have access to like technology to create an artificial intelligence. And like, if we don't come up with these procedures or like these traps or these boxes, like what is stopping just someone that's sick of the way that things are and uploading an AI to the internet to try and change it? And it like, and because they haven't been working as a team or haven't had the foresight or really thought about the implications, they're just doing it with an intent, that could like really screw the planet up. Or even not even just an average person, like just a leader that just wants to stay in power. And it's like, how can we manipulate the voting system if it goes digital or something? And they just launch something like that and it just completely crashes everything. It'd be devastating. And like we're close to there. We're not far off it.
Yeah, I think so as well.
It's a scary one, really. But
that's another cheerful episode of The Infinite Void.
That's part 2. Hopefully next week we've got part 3, which will be consciousness, which should be quite a fun one. Mind you, though, saying that we're just going to have more crises, so get ready for that. And then part 4 is going to be morals and ethics, and then part 5 is looking to the future, which I feel like we've done in every episode, but we'll just probably be going into a lot more detail and showing people what their great grandchildren might be living in.
Yeah.
But should we move on to news?
Yeah. I've got 2 bits on Starlink, so do you want me to go first or second?
You can go first if you like.
Okay, so the first bit of Starlink news that I had was that so SpaceX recently launched a load of new satellites. It was on January 24th. I think I saw it was the most satellites launched at once. It was like 130 or something like that. It was a lot. And on part of that, they had quite a few of their own. They had 10 Starlink satellites. And these were the first ones to go into a polar orbit that they've launched. So rather than going around sort of around the equator roughly, it goes over the poles. Which is interesting because it obviously gives them more coverage on the Earth. But some of these Starlinks have laser interlinks, which I genuinely didn't even know that this was like a technology that they've proven yet. But apparently it's up there now working. So you have 2 satellites and they're able to communicate between each other using lasers.
Okay.
So and the idea is that you can reduce the amount of ground stations that you need to use. That's sort of the plan of it, and it is particularly important for the polar ones because there's not many ground stations over the poles. So rather than having to either go dark until you get over a ground station again, you can have a ground station linked to one satellite, and then the satellite talk to other satellites using these lasers and communicate between them.
That's cool.
So it gives you more sort of ground station coverage because each ground station, rather than just being able to see what it can see what the other satellites can see, sort of thing. But also apparently reduces latency and things because rather than having to go satellite ground station back and forth, you can just go satellite, you can just go ground station, satellite, and then directly to the satellite. So
no, that sounds sick.
that's sort of the plan behind it. But yeah, they've got some Starlinks up now, and there's more to come later this year that have this interconnect laser on them, so which I think is pretty awesome.
That's insane.
Mm-hmm. I genuinely didn't even know that this was like a thing. But yeah, apparently during they said during a September 2020 webcast of the Starlink launch, the company said it had tested the space lasers between two satellites and was relaying hundreds of gigabits of data. So it seems pretty resilient, and they've tested it, and it's now working. Apparently,
Nice.
mm-hmm. And then the other bit of Starlink news that I had was: have you seen the thing going down on Twitter with Amazon and Starlink? Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk.
So I'm not actually sure what's going on, but I've seen people talking about this. Is this Amazon trying to create their own version of Starlink, and Elon's complaining that they shouldn't?
It's a bit messy, and I'm to be honest, I'm not that familiar with what Amazon has got at the moment or hasn't got in terms of like satellite systems. But what I've seen of it, and I'm looking at a Business Insider article, it says Amazon's protesting to the FCC because Starlink want to lower their orbits. They want to move some satellites into a lower orbit, which I think Amazon are either already using or have got like plans to use for their system. And they're basically saying that, well, we want these orbits and we sort of have plans to use them, and you know about those plans. It sort of seems like Starlink have, Elon Musk and Starlink have basically said, well, no, we want to use those orbits because of technical reasons and things. And they're saying, well, no, actually, it looks like what you're trying to do is stop us using them so that you can like smell the competition. And it's like, I think it's a bit of back and forth at the moment. I said, I'm not sure really what Amazon's sort of situation is in this space, but it seems that like Amazon is saying you want to use these orbits to stop us using them, and SpaceX is saying, oh no, you're going to use these orbits to stop us using them. And I think we said it in like our, I think maybe even like Space Debris episode, that someone should probably start organizing orbits and properly governing this stuff. We're actually getting exactly this situation, and that like two companies want to use the same orbit. It's like...
There should be like an orbit accords.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that, well, again, this is like the problem with the space treaty, is that like this is what the space treaty is meant to do, but it's not very well legislated and sort of prosecuted. I think the space treaty basically says you shouldn't put satellites in a position that they can damage things or hinder other people. Like space is meant to be a thing that everyone can use. But it's very difficult to prosecute that because, like, both of these companies can say, "Well, I have as much right to use it as the other one."
especially when it's private as well, because like there's less accountability. Like you can't have the nations holding a nation accountable if it's just a private company in that nation that's launched it. So yeah, it's messy.
Yeah, and I think basically at the moment there's this standoff now with who's going to get these orbits and what's going to happen. And this will almost certainly become a bigger issue because of the amount of satellites being launched,
Yeah.
I think Starlink said they want, is it about 40,000 satellites?
Yeah.
A lot of orbital space for one company to have. And
I was thinking about this. If we get to a point where like we're throwing up these kind of things, like you've got Starlink, OneWeb, the Russian one, say if Europe want to put one up, Amazon want to put one up, India want to put one up, Japan want to put one up. Like, is it going to get to a point where like we have designated launch windows for rockets that are very, very tight because for the rest of the day, there is stuff flying over in orbit? And like there are like 1 hour windows here and there every day that you can send something up, and that's it.
I honestly don't know. Like, again, space is big, but they will probably become, and they're already like the International Space Station has to do maneuvers around stuff.
Yeah.
And there was one recently, like again, this was like another bit of Elon Musk drama. Was like Elon Musk said And so I understood that the International Space Station said, like, there is a non-zero chance that your satellite's going to collide with us. Can you move it? And they said no. so, and that was that. And the International Space Station had to take a evasive maneuver.
Yeah.
I managed to find some more information on it. So the Amazon thing is called Kuiper Systems.
Okay.
I don't know if it's a sub company or it's a like internal project, but that's what it's called. They've not yet launched satellites, but they want a fleet of 3,236 satellites. And SpaceX's Starlink's meant to have 42,000 satellites in its final system. So, yeah,
That's insane.
It does seem a little bit like Amazon, not to take sides, but Amazon have said, right, we're going to use these orbits, and Starlink has said, we'll have those.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. It's like, oh, well, we're not going to put anything up. We just want to move ours down to it.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. That doesn't seem good.
But yeah, again, like, I don't want to take sides on this stuff, and both companies have as much right to use the orbits as the other one, but it does feel like someone needs to stop and think about this and actually put some system in place to govern it.
Yeah. No, I'd agree.
Mm-hmm.
I'd agree. Well, my 2 bits of news, they're a bit different. Well, one's to do with like space technology, I guess. So today, NASA astronauts Victor Glover and Michael Hopkins were outside the ISS for 6 hours installing a new British instrument to the International Space Station. And there's not that much information on it, but from what I've seen, it's a communication device, and it's for their space broadband that they want to build, the interplanetary space broadband one.
Mm-hmm.
But it looks cool. It's nice to see the UK contributing something to the space program.
Yeah, so I think this is. I think even though we've left the EU, I think we're still part of ESA, aren't we? We have like some partner of ESA. So I think this communications thing is going to link to the ESA centre near Oxford, I think. Although it's like a British device, I think it's still very much an ESA centric sort of component. So yeah,
I've just read here it's for biomining research. So apparently they've been having problems with delays and corrupt data getting lost in transit as it's being sent back to Earth. So this communication system is going to deliver the message instantaneously, and they're hoping that this can solve the issue that they've been having with it. So that's pretty cool.
Thanks to space internet. That's always good.
And 6 hours on a spacewalk is pretty long, isn't it? Imagine that, being outside the International Space Station for 6 hours.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'd get vertigo being up there. I've often thought about this because when I stand near something high, right, I get a little bit like, oh, that's high. But then when I'm like in a plane, I'm usually all right. Yeah. But like, I'd never really thought about being in orbit, that you're just forever falling. So like, are you going to have the feeling of falling, or is it going to be relative to you that like it's just going to look like the Earth's moving? Because I feel like 6 hours, but saying that, I guess you'd feel the same inside as you would outside of the International Space Station, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I can tell you now, I'd give anything to do it.
Yeah, I'd give anything to do it too. Even if I'm like that horrible scene in Life where that person's throwing up in their helmet, I will do it. I just would like to go to space. I haven't included this in my space news, but I'm just going to say it quickly, and we will definitely cover it next week because I don't know who it is. But haven't they just confirmed the first private group of people going to the ISS?
Yeah. Begins with A. I was looking at it just before we came on.
Xero.
Oh, is it space? Hold on, we're gonna have to find this now.
Yeah, this needs to be included.
Axiom, that's it.
Axiom.
Yeah, they've named the first private crew to visit the space station. It went up just before we started recording. So
And wasn't it like 55 million per person or something?
I've literally not seen anything. I just remember seeing the name.
All right,
and
well,
the headline.
we will definitely cover this more next week, but I think
Mhm.
I think it's either 55 million for all four of them, or it was 55 million per human.
Mhm.
But it's
We'll
for
find out.
it's for men, isn't it? I think.
Yeah.
But we'll find out next week for that one, because that is some pretty cool space tourism / research news. I don't actually know what they're going up there for, if it is just a trip or not, but it's mad that Tom Cruise isn't included in that either, because isn't he going up soon to shoot a film?
Yeah, I've seen that. They're meant to be shooting some film up on the space station, but we'll see.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. But for my other little piece of space / science news, we've got this. The studies come out, haven't they, with the TRAPPIST-1 system?
Mm-hmm.
So they found 7 Earth-like planets in the system, which in itself is really, really cool. And these 7 Earth-like planets, or rocky exoplanets, are orbiting an ultra-cool dwarf star located 38.8 light years away. So not too far, but not too close. But what's interesting is they are 8% less dense than what they would be if they had the same makeup as Earth. And they don't know why.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a weird one. I did briefly skim through this, and it's also like the fact that they're all very, very similar, aren't they?
Yeah.
In density. So, unlike our planet, unlike our solar system, we have the rocky inner planets and the gas giants, which obviously have very different densities. The TRAPPIST-1 planets seem to have very, very similar densities that aren't comparable to Earth. So
yeah, it's crazy, man. As well, I was chatting to my girlfriend about this one earlier today, because I was like, can you, like, we have come from like a solar system that, like, it seems pretty unlikely that life can exist anywhere, because like we've only got Earth, and then Venus is like a hellhole, and Mars is freezing, and then like obviously we can live on them, but we would require assistance. And then like when you see like some of these like crazy other planetary systems and stuff, like this one that's got like 8 similar planets and stuff, if you were like life that started out at these, you'd be like, oh, like their Drake equation must be so much better than ours. They must be like, oh, all planets are livable. Like, look at our solar system. All 8 of these planets have the same atmosphere as us. We could just hop as we please, kind of thing. And it's just crazy that like we've managed to find one that's got 8 planets that are very similar to each other, but less dense than Earth if they were made up the same stuff as Earth. So they're not like Earth, but they're just all similar to each other, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah, there's if you're on the same article that I am, the Sci News one, there's a really interesting graphic. I've seen it before. Lower down, comparing what the planets look like compared to our planets.
Yeah.
And like they all fall in this very flat line of like density, so they're all very similar density, but 3 of the planets fall within the TRAPPIST-1 habitable zone, and the planet density is just slightly below Earth. So there's basically like 3 candidates for planets that are similar to Earth in size and in the habitable zone, and relatively similar density. So
like you gotta be really lucky to be life starting out on that planet, haven't you? Because you've got 2 next to you that are like great if this one goes wrong. Like they literally have a planet B and a planet C if they get global warming or they do something that they don't realize in.
Yep.
That's insane. Like that's just absolutely insane. It's weird as well, because I was just reading here that like you were saying, because we have like gas giants and then rocky planets, then gas giants. I wonder why they've like more evenly formed. Do you reckon? Because I have no idea when it comes to this kind of stuff. Is it like the dwarf star, maybe like having less of a gravitational pull, so like it hasn't divided the material in the gases, and they've just been able to like sit with each other a little bit more?
Yeah, I did study a bit of like solar system formation back in uni, and I think the honest answer is we're not even sure like how our solar system evolved in this way. Like, there's all these theories of planets drifting in and out, and they sort of like develop further out and then move in, and the gas giants switch around and stuff. So, that's definitely a good suggestion. That's like these planets, the smaller star sort of doesn't separate out the matter in its disk as much, and that's why they sort of all form quite evenly. But yeah, I genuinely don't think we really know why, to be honest.
It's interesting. But no, I'm looking at that graph. That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
We'll drop this in the notes as well for anybody listening if you want to go and check it out. But I think that pretty much wraps up part 2 for this week. So thank you for listening. If you made it to the end, and if you want to drop us a message or hit us up on the socials, it's the Infinite Void podcast at gmail.com, and the socials for Instagram and Twitter are Infinite Void Pod. And then if you want to drop me or Matty a message on Twitter, you can. I'm at Jacob E. Carson, and Matty's the Matty JMP. And yeah, we will catch you in the Infinite Void next week for part 3. Hey everyone, we wanted to take a moment to tell you about our brand new Patreon page.
Yeah, so we've devised a load of new goodies that are neatly packaged across 3 different tiers for you.
Tiers start at £3 and go all the way up to £10 a month.
Just to say, the Patreon is in no way an obligation, and we're going to continue making the podcast as it is, freely available across all the platforms. But if you'd like to support us and show your support, you can now.
So yeah, head over to patreon.com/Infinite Void Pod for more information.